Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, welcome back to my video game review series. Now, those of you who have been following my channel recently will know that I've been reviewing every Lord of the Rings video game, and some long-time viewers of mine will also know that a few years ago, when I first started this channel, one of the first games I ever reviewed was Lord of the Rings War in the North, and since I already reviewed the game, I considered just skipping over it. But to be perfectly honest, looking back at that review in retrospect, I'm not ultimately happy with the way it turned out. The main reason for that is the fact that when I made that review I had zero experience in regards to editing and producing a video game review, and as a result of it, the review just isn't very good quality, certainly not when compared to my more recent videos. So I figured why not replay the game, and rather than review it all over again, just give it some retrospective thoughts, and just talk about some views and opinions that I have on the game. And while replaying the game in retrospect and comparing it to not only the other Lord of the Rings video games, but other RPGs and video games of its kind that came out around about the same time. And I have to say, in my personal opinion, War in the North is one of the most underrated and underappreciated games out there, and is certainly in my personal opinion the most underrated Lord of the Rings game. So when this game came out, it got pretty much tore apart by critics, and I never understood why. Sure, the game isn't perfect, there are a few too many invisible walls, and the game, yeah, it can feel linear in spots, but putting those minor issues aside, the game is about as authentic and immersive a Lord of the Rings experience as you can get. So the game is basically a third-person action-adventure RPG. The story of the game takes place alongside the events of the Lord of the Rings books. It covers the events of what took place in the northern lands of Middle-earth during the events of the War of the Ring. You begin the game in the village of Bree, where Aragorn, the chieftain of the Dunedain, tasks the three main characters of the game with travelling to Fornos to find out what's going on there. You get to choose between these three playable characters: Eredan, who is a Dunedain ranger from Sarn Ford, Farin, who is a dwarf originally from the Iron Hills, who now resides in Erebor, and Andriel, the she-elf, an elven lawmaster from Rivendell. These three characters are very different in terms of their gameplay experience. Playing as Farin, you are basically a mini battle tank. He has the most powerful melee attacks and the most armor, making him more durable. He also uses a crossbow as his ranged attack, and as you might expect, this can be upgraded in several ways, making it significantly more powerful. As Andriel, you are more of a mage and a healer, not quite as strong or as durable as the others, but with magical abilities that can serve several purposes, such as making shields for deflecting arrows, healing yourself and your allies, or creating potions. She uses a staff as both a melee weapon and a ranged weapon, striking enemies and firing bolts at them from long range. Playing as Eredan, you get more of a balanced experience between the other two. He has great melee fighting skills with his sword, as well as powerful ranged attacks using his bow and expert archery skills. Being a ranger, Eredan has a wide range of fighting skills and feels more versatile. The combat of the game at first glance seems simple, but as you play through the game you will earn experience points, and these can be used to unlock new powers and upgrades. It's a pretty simple yet sophisticated enough leveling up system that is nuanced while not being too steep a learning curve. You also have plenty of enemy variety, as well as numerous interesting and well designed locations in Middle-earth to explore, such as Fornos, the ruined former capital of the Kingdom of Arnor, the Etten Moors, the Barrow Downs, Mount Gundabad, Mirkwood, and several others. You fight various different types of orcs such as grunts, archers, and mages. You fight giant spiders, the men of Carndun, trolls, and various other types of villains from Middle-earth. The level design and visual aesthetics of these locations, as well as the character models, looks really great for 2011. In between each of the action-adventure sections of the game you get a hub area. These areas are basically chill-out type areas where you can explore at your own pace and barter with vendors for armor, weapons, and several other goodies, and even converse with characters who will sometimes have side quests for you. The sad thing is that when this game originally came out, most of the mainstream reviewers who shat on the game so much seemed to leave these features out, as if they decided to just speedrun through the game, rather than take the time to actually appreciate it. These slower, more RPG heavy sections of the game are actually my favourite thing about it. You can have numerous conversations with NPCs, and then even choose your responses in some of these conversations. Depending on what character you are playing as, the dialogue will mostly be different. The game has hundreds of recorded lines of dialogue and the voice acting is excellent. I mentioned before that you can sometimes be given side quests, and these side quests are usually very interesting and the rewards for completing them are really worth it. You can also return to these areas from time to time to see how your actions affected those areas and the characters in them, and sometimes if you're too late, you can even manage to fail one of your side quests. What's cool about these conversations too is you get a lot of insight and plenty of references to the lore of Tolkien's Middle-earth, such as the history of certain regions and characters that were left out of the books and movies, showing you that the developers of the game had a genuine passion for Tolkien's work, and wanted to share that passion with the player. Man, the more I think about it, the more it pisses me off and makes me so mad that many of these so-called critics bashed the game when it came out despite barely even giving it a chance. I mentioned earlier that the story of this game plays alongside the events of The Lord of the Rings. As a result of that, you get to come across several characters from the books and movies, as well as some new ones that were made up for the game. You can have full fleshed out conversations with the likes of Frodo, Gandalf, Aragorn, Gimli, Elrond, and even Bilbo Baggins. You meet and fight alongside characters who were left out of the movies, such as the Sons of Elrond. Even the new characters introduced to the game have plenty of character development and lore behind them, such as the Dwarves of Nordinbad, who are introduced to you later in the game. Even the Rangers of Sarnford have some interesting things to say, and some lore to add to further indulge yourself in Tolkien's works. This is the only Lord of the Rings game I can think of that can truly lay claim to this. Sure, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War are great action-adventure games, but in all honesty, those games absolutely disrespected and disregarded Tolkien's lore, and rather than add an immersive, story-based experience, decided to instead focus on action and combat. If I'm being perfectly honest, I would not be at all surprised if the negative reviews and criticisms that War in the North received was the main reason for the shallow nature of those games in regards to the lack of lore and RPG-style dialogue, but I digress. The game also has several pretty epic boss battles. You take on the likes of the Barrow-wights, Orc Captains, a giant Spider Queen in Mirkwood, a huge stone giant in the Etenmoors, and of course the main villain of the game, Agandaur. I found Agandaur to be a really interesting antagonist for the game. He is a black Númenórean, similar in many ways to the Mouth of Sauron, and in addition to being a servant of Sauron, he was even rumoured to have been trained in sorcery by Sauron himself, and tasked with leading Sauron's army during his attempted conquest of the North. He is insanely powerful and intimidating as a villain, and despite not being an official canon part of the Tolkien Legendarium, he's still a fantastic addition to the game nonetheless. The boss battles are all fantastic and unique in their own way. You even come across a dragon at one point named Urgost, and have to negotiate with him in a battle of wits. Some people were disappointed that you never actually had to fight the dragon in a boss battle, and I did feel that way on my first playthrough, but in retrospect, a battle of wits against the dragon and not actually taking it head on seems more consistent with Tolkien's lore. Tolkien made it very clear in his works that dragons are some of the most powerful creatures in Middle-earth, and for an elf, a man and a dwarf to take on one would seem a bit far-fetched. Either way, the game is pretty fantastic and I have an absolute blast playing through it. To me, in retrospect, this is the most fun and immersive experience you can get in regards to Lord of the Rings video games. And the game is certainly criminally underrated and gets nowhere near as much credit as it deserves in my personal opinion. Seriously, when I hear critics call this game a repetitive hack and slash or a simple beat 'em up game, I cringe. The game is a much deeper experience than it got credit for, and if I'm being perfectly honest, in retrospect, I actually prefer this game to Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. Sure, those games have better combat and graphics, but they don't feel like Lord of the Rings, rather an Assassin's Creed, Batman Arkham Simulator with a Lord of the Rings paint job. War in the North, on the other hand, genuinely feels like an authentic Lord of the Rings game, and is mostly faithful to the source material and the Legendarium. In retrospect, I give War in the North a solid 9 out of 10. Sure, the game isn't perfect, it has some issues, it has invisible walls, and sure, the game has some issues that you could nitpick, just like any game. But not enough of them in my personal opinion to take away points. But, of course, this is just my personal opinion, and as they say, opinions are like arseholes. Everybody's got one. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section of this video. if you want to, and if I have any points that you think I might have missed, feel free to let me know. Thanks for watching, guys. I really enjoyed replaying and reviewing Lord of the Rings War in the North. One potential reason I thought about recently for why the game never did very well with critics at the time of its release could have been to do with its competition. 2011 was an absolutely fantastic year, and a great year for video games in particular. You had so many great games that came out that year, games such as Skyrim, Batman Arkham City, Gears of War 3, Saints Row the Third, just to name a few. Those are just a few right there, right off the top of my head. I reviewed all those games on the channel, by the way, if you want to check them out. It could just be that, in amongst all of those great games, War in the North just didn't really stand out much, and didn't capture the attention of gamers like those games did. Nonetheless, I give this game a solid 9 out of 10. I love the game, and would recommend it to any Lord of the Rings fan, or any RPG fan for that matter. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned for more retrospective video game reviews. Once again, I have a lot of reviews coming to the channel in the near future. Thanks for watching, and God bless.